Hi, everyone. I'm Jasmine Miranda. I'm an assistant marketing manager at Bloomsbury Children's Books, and I'm so excited to introduce Jamar Perry. He's a debut author on our list with his book, Cameron Battle and the Hidden Kingdoms, which debuts in February 1st, next week, which we're very excited about. It's a middle grade novel based on West African and Igbo mythology, and it's an adventurous middle grade packed with action and perfect for fans of Tristan Strong. Jamar is a has a PhD in literary education, language, culture, and social inquiry at the University of Maryland, College Park. He taught middle school language arts for 4 years before pursuing his PhD. And like Cameron, he hopes that one day Black boys can understand how magical and joyful they are. So, hi, Jamar. How are you feeling today?
I'm good, Jasmine. Thank you so much for doing this interview with me. I'm really good today. I'm really excited about next week and really excited for the book to come out.
So, tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, so Cameron Battle and the Hidden Kingdoms, as you can see from my bookshelf. I want to make sure that you could all get a chance to kind of see it. And then I also have the cover here, have a copy here. So Cameron Battle and the Hidden Kingdoms is about a 12-year-old Black boy named Cameron Battle. When he was 10 years old, his parents disappeared, and his grandmother tells him that they died in a car crash. So because of that, he is told that he has to go live with his grandmother, so that she can take care of him. And so Cameron Battle is he's a lonely boy. He misses his parents a lot, but he remembers the stories that they told him growing up of this magical book that was passed down through the generations of his family. And in that book, the book details the Igbo gods, mythology. There's magical creatures in it. There's information about fighting styles of this magical land. And it also gives some information about the magical country of Shidani. And so one night, his grandmother takes the book away from him and she says that he can't read the book anymore because she has all this grief that his parents are gone. And so 2 years later, he's having a summer sleepover with his two best friends, Aaliyah and Zion. And so once he's having that sleepover with them, they convince him to go to the attic where his grandmother has taken the book away from Cameron. And when they read the book, it opens this fantastical world of Shadani. And then Cameron realizes that all the stories that his parents told him were true.
Yeah, and that action kind of just rips itself right off the page. It's
Yeah.
it has such rich world building. So how did you
Thank you.
develop Chidani, and what details did you enjoy writing most?
Yeah, so I developed Shadani by it was it was a little hard for me to do. So like for me, like I had to really think about like the internal processes of the characters themselves first before I built around them. So what I did first was I created Cameron first. I created him as the main character of the story because I really wanted to showcase not only a Black boy in fantasy, but also a Black boy who becomes a hero in fantasy. And so after I created Cameron, then I was able to kind of build the world around him. So again, building up his parents, building who his grandmother is, building who his two best friends, Aaliyah and Zion, are. And then after I built the characters around him, then I want to, build how he interacts with the world. And so after that, it was really easy for me to kind of build the fantasy country of Shadani around Cameron. And for me, the best thing about writing this book was like what I said about how Cameron Battle is a Black boy. So, as I said in other interviews that I've done so far, Cameron Battle was written as a kind of like an analog to myself when I was a child. So when I was a child, I was a very, very lonely child. I was very, very isolated. I didn't really have many friends growing up. And so because I didn't have that, growing up, I really didn't know what it meant to be a friend, and I didn't really know what it meant to have friends. So I kind of just put everything into reading. And so when I was in school growing up, every time there was recess, or every time we went to lunch, or every time I had a break in the middle of the school day, I would always take out a book and read. And so I just remember growing up that my goal every day was to read one book a day. And I did that for, I think, when I was in grade four, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth. It was always one book a day that I wanted to read every single day. And I read so much back then that I don't even remember what I was reading, to be honest, because I read so much. And so the biggest part for me was this was just like a cathartic experience for me to create a character named Cameron Battle who not only enjoys reading and um, enjoys escaping in the book that his parents left him. It was just a way for me to kind of really work out the things that I kind of went through as a child and really showcasing Cameron as someone, not only is he lonely, but he has struggles too. He gets sad, he laughs, he has joyous occasions, he's happy sometimes, but he's also struggling as well too, because he lost his parents, right? And so for me, it was all about, in order to build this world, I had to figure out who is his character, what makes him tick, what makes him happy, what makes him joyous, and how does he find happiness through the struggles that he has. And so that part for me was, not only was it a good thing for me to kind of work through my own childhood, but it was also hard for me too as well to kind of rethink through the things that happened through my childhood. But I'm glad that I was able to kind of work through those things and put that through Cameron's lens.
Yeah, definitely. What you said about you basically are writing to your childhood self.
Right.
And so many children will be able to see themselves when they read this book, which is it makes
I
it so
agree.
important.
Oh, thank you.
Um, so what does it mean to you that there'll be children who will be able to see themselves maybe for the first time with your book?
Yeah, it means a lot to me. Like it really means a lot because growing up, like when you are a black person in America and you're growing up and the books that you read, there just weren't that many books that we read that had characters that looked like us in the books. And if they did have characters that looked like us in the books, they were always side characters. They weren't really main characters. So they were stock characters that had, they were just characters who just dealt in black stereotypes, really. And so for me, growing up, you get used to that. You get used to not having that representation when you're growing up. So I didn't really see it as a problem, right? So when you get inundated in it, and then that's all you see is white main characters, and you see white boy main characters, and you see these characters become heroes, and you see these characters use magic, and you see these characters learn how to fight, and you see these characters go through just a lot in their childhoods. You feel like your story is not worthy of being pushed into the mainstream. And so I just became used to it. And so it wasn't a thing where I felt that there was a lack there, but it wasn't something that I was sad about until I went to college, when I actually got exposed to authors who actually put black people at the forefront, who actually had black people in fantasy novels, and who actually had black people dealing with problems that they needed to deal with and then becoming heroes at the end of the novel. And so for me, it's just really, really important for me to, I don't want kids to grow up the way that I did, where they don't see the heroes in front of them at all. And then they get so inundated by whiteness that they don't think that they actually can be heroes, right? And so there's a lot of research that's being done now, that showcases that when black people or when diverse cultures don't get to see themselves represented, they don't see themselves in the future at all, right? So they see themselves in the past because the past is traumatic, right?
Yeah.
They see themselves in the present because the present is precarious, right? Because of all the stuff that we're going through in America now. But they don't really see themselves in the future, right? Because they've always been told that the future is not open to them. Well, with Cameron Battle, I really want to show kids that your childhood is going to be different. I want your childhood to be different from mine. I want you to be able to thrust yourself in the future and see yourself, in ways that I didn't get to see myself. So I'm really excited about, that aspect of it.
Yeah. And it's such a, I don't know why people think it's so novel. When you think about it, role models have always been a thing. If you see
Mhm.
something, you can be it. That's part of the reason why when you see people in power who look like you, it's such a powerful thing.
Right.
So you brushed on this a little bit, but you are an educator.
Mhm.
How did these experience kind of influence how you worked and how you approach writing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it really inspired me a lot because, my entire career of teaching before I got my PhD was all middle school. I taught sixth grade first. I taught seventh grade the second year. I taught eighth grade the third year, and then my fourth year teaching, I stayed in eighth grade. And so my entire teaching was middle school kids, and it was just interesting to see like how middle school kids can be you know, they're still children in a lot of ways, but they also have this air of, I want to be an adult now. And I know that I'm going to high school later. And I know that there are some things that I want to get off my chest, right? Middle
Right.
school is that age where students start to feel, well, children start to feel like, you know, I'm still a child and people are still treating me like a child, but I do have these opinions of my own. And I do want to be able to speak to those experiences as well. And so when that experience for me, just thinking about my own experience in middle school and then also thinking about and then connecting them to the children that I taught, it made writing this book an easier thing for me because Cameron, as you and if you probably read the book, Cameron has opinions, right?
Yeah.
He's not a static character who stays one way throughout the entire novel. Like he has opinions. He thinks sometimes he thinks that he can't do it. Sometimes he thinks that he is a hero, and then when he does become a hero, he starts backsliding. He says, "Well, I don't want to be a hero anymore," right? And so he has those things where there is a thing where he knows that he needs to grow up, but there's also moments where he still wants to be a child as well too. And so this experience of teaching middle school and then connecting that experience with me being a child really helped me to kind of formulate who Cameron was and to formulate who his best friends are because they're in middle school too, and also to be able to thrust him into something totally different.
Yeah. And I think that you did such a great job in like
Oh, thank you.
describing that dynamic between Cameron and his best
Mhm.
friends. And that can only come from somebody who knows how kids act and how they think
Right.
and how their bonds work. So what are some books and authors that inspired you? I know you said you can't really remember all the books you read when you were a kid, but there's maybe one or two that stick out the most.
Yes, there are a couple that stick out the most to me, and I was actually doing a. Do I have that book? Where is it? Is it on my bookshelf? Um, no, it's not. It's not on my bookshelf right now. But there was a couple books that I remember distinctly as a child reading that really stuck with me, and that really kind of fueled the way that I think about literature today and think about how um, specifically middle school students deal with the world. I don't know if I'm sure you probably have, but it's one of the biggest novels. It's Roll Up Thunder, Hear My Cry by
Of
Mildred
course,
E. Taylor, right? And we've all heard that.
such a great
But
book.
that book, I remember thinking, because I remember like as I talk about like, I read so much growing up that sometimes I forget how many books I read, but that book sticks out to me the most. And I didn't know why it stuck out with me the most and why it stuck with me throughout the entire my entire life. But as I think about it as a grown adult at 31 years old, I think I have an answer why it did. Because that novel was written in 1976. Well, it was published in 1976. But the novel is from a it reads like it's from a different time, even though it is set in a different time, right? It's set in the Great Depression, and
Right.
it's set in Jim Crow, really, right? And so it's talking about this black girl who's in middle school, and her name is Cassie Logan, and she's growing up on a farm with her parents, and throughout the novel she's dealing with you know her family trying to keep their farm. She's dealing with going to school. She's dealing with growing up, but she's also dealing with the racism and the discrimination that Black people had to go through during that time in order to lead to the civil rights movement. And so that book really sticks with me because it not only does it show that these really sticky subject matters like racism, discrimination, and prejudice, and lynching, and the killing of Black people, and the maiming of Black people, and then the taking of their land, we're dealing with really sticky subjects and really what a lot of adults will want to call adult subjects, but it's filtered through the lens of a 12-year-old girl, right? And so we get to know the world through her own eyes. And not only do we get to know the world through her own eyes, but we get to really experience what it means to live in the Jim Crow South, right?
Right.
During the Great Depression. And so we get to feel when she's walking to school and she doesn't have a bus to get on, right? We get to feel when she's walking in the dust and the dust is covering her feet. We get to feel when a school bus goes past her and it's full of white students, and the bus driver who's driving the bus um, deliberately goes to the side of the road to almost hit them, right? So we get to feel those moments and we get to really live those moments through the eyes of a 12-year-old girl. And I think it sticks with me the most because not we get to really feel and experience Cassie Logan, but also really get to feel and experience an entire time period that none of us lived in, right? And so I think that sticks with me the most, that book. And then another book that I loved growing up was, do I have a copy of it? No, it's not up here. But I don't know if you've heard these novels, but it's totally different from Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. But it's DJ Makhill's Pendragon novels, and so those novels really touch on a boy who realizes that there's multiple Earths, right? And so there's a mentor who comes to him and says that you live on Earth, but there are multiple worlds out there, and you have to be the hero to save these worlds. And so when I wrote Cameron Battle, it's really just a hodgepodge of those two, right? So Cameron Battle is a Black boy who has to deal with his Black ancestry, and has to deal with the pains of slavery, and has to deal with where he comes from in West Africa, but he also has to save an entire world too. And so I kind of just put those two ideas together and created Cameron Battle, and then I wrote the novel. I know it's a long answer, but those are some of the novels that really kind of inspired me and still inspire me today.
No, it's a great answer. I think that what sticks out to me about Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry in particular is it kind of ties to that idea that literature brings history to life. You can see it through somebody's eyes, and things that when people read about the painful past, it's like they try to imagine like there was no joy, or there was no
there was, right.
And it's like we got through this through like our families and through the love, and yeah. So I think that your book tying the fantasy with that feeling it makes perfect sense to me.
Right.
So last question, no spoilers, but what comes next for Cameron?
So what comes next for Cameron, and I'm so happy that you just mentioned that, because I just finished the sequel to it, and I got my edits back from my editor. So what comes next for Cameron is, I'm trying to do this without spoiling the novel.
Some themes or
I think Cameron comes into his own when it comes to love. I think in the first book, I think I explored that a little bit with his best friend Zion. So Cameron he's a Black kid. He's also a Black queer boy as well. And so in the second book, he comes to learn more about who Zion is, and they come to really get to know each other. I mean, they've always loved each other. They've always loved each other for a long time. And in the first book, I kind of explored that love between the two. In the second book, that love is solidified, I think. And so they become more one in the second book, and I explore that, and how does that look for middle grade kids? Because so many times, people think that you don't experience love, or you don't have crushes, and you don't really know what that is till you get to high school and college. But I don't really think that's true, right? Just given how a lot of kids grow up, right? Especially at middle school age, that's when they're supposed to be figuring out who they are. And so Cameron is figuring out himself in the second book, I think. So he comes to understand what true love is. And people tell him what true love is too. I can't tell you who tells him what it is, but there's a lot of characters in the novel who support, the love that he has for Zion. And I hope that comes through. Another big thing is that we see more of the gods. Like, we really see who they are, what they do, what makes them tick, and what makes them, either help you or harm you, right? And so I think I answered these questions. Who are the gods? Are they nice people? Are they mean people? Are they neutral people? Are there bargains that you have to strike with them in order to get what you want? And if you do strike a bargain with them, how do they respond to that bargain? Because sometimes a bargain is, like, when you're dealing with humans, a bargain is, I give you this, you give me this, right? With a god, is it that straightforward, right? Or is there other factors that you have to deal with when you're bargaining with a god? And so we really get to understand who the gods are. We get to see more of the gods, and we get to see more of their domains and where they live and all that stuff. And I think we also just kind of get to see the conclusion of, like, the first story arc of Cameron Battle. We also get to see that conclusion. I can't tell you what that conclusion is, but we get to see the conclusion of that arc that I set out in the first book. And so my editor was talking to me the other day about, so what do you think about doing a trilogy? What are you thinking? And I'm just like, that makes sense, right? It would make sense to do a trilogy. But if I did do a third book in the novel, it would have to be a completely, totally different story, because the first two books in a duology I think it tells the first arc of Cameron's story. So I'm really excited to think about a second arc of his story as well.
That is so exciting.
Oh, thank
I'm sure that anybody who just heard that is eager for book two,
you.
as much as I am. So Cameron Battle and the Hidden Kingdoms comes out next week. It's been so great talking to you, Jamar.
Oh, thank you so much, Jasmine. So nice talking to you too.
Right, bye.
Bye.